Hello, my name is Matilda Isumia. This is a summary of a literature review on the impact of flipped classroom and academic performance. And this is a project for IT 830, Contemporary Issues in Distance Education. The instructor for this course is Professor Dusti Howell. So let's begin by looking at the objectives for this presentation. So we want to know what flipped classroom is and what is the problem statement. And then we're also going to look at the advantages of flipped classroom and then how flipped classroom is related to academic performance. And then I'm going to do a comparison of flipped classroom and distance education, since this whole course is about distance education. So what is flipped classroom? According to Bishop and Vallinger, flipped classroom has two major components. And these components are direct computer-based individualized instruction, which is outside the classroom. And then inside the classroom, there is interactive group learning activities that happens. So what does this mean? This means that the classroom is actually flipped, just as the name says. And so the activities that are supposed to be done inside the classroom, the real instruction that is supposed to be done inside the classroom, is done outside the classroom. So students are actually given instructional materials in the form of videos to be able to interact with them in the house and study them before they come to the classroom. So that is what flipped classroom is all about. And when they are in the classroom, they do a lot of interactive learning activities by way of group discussion, by way of problem-based learning, collaborating with other students and learners, asking the instructor the problem that they encountered during interaction with these materials that they were given to interact with outside the classroom. So why did I want to review literature on flipped classroom? I realized that a lot of the research that had been done was about the main activities that are done during a flipped classroom instruction. Very few literature were talking about exactly what impact flipped classroom has on student learning achievement. And that is why I wanted to see how this approach to learning is affecting students' learning performance. So what advantages do students get from flipped classroom? Now, because students already interact with videos before they come to the classroom, it helps them to get enough time to be able to interact with others, do a lot of collaborative learning activities, do problem solving, and also ask their instructors questions that may be baffling their mind whilst they were interacting with the videos. It also helps to improve self-efficacy. So the student becomes very efficient because they are able to interact with these materials before they come. And so they have already prepared questions that they want to ask their instructor. They know how they are going to collaborate with their other students to be able to get the best out of the instruction that they are undertaking. And also, because students are doing a lot of these activities themselves, it helps to build them up to be able to acquire knowledge individually. So they kind of take their own learning into their own hands. And so they are actively involved in the knowledge acquisition. It also helps them to be very autonomous, and then it also motivates them to be able to know more in the classroom and then even outside the classroom. And so with all these activities, how does these activities affect students' academic achievements? And these are some few things that I came up with during the literature review. So flipped classroom obviously encourages critical thinking because students are actively involved in their own knowledge acquisition. It helps them to think critically, be able to interact with these videos and ask themselves questions and write questions down to be able to ask their students. Sometimes research on the internet to be able to get some understanding even before they come to the classroom. So it helps these students to think critically. Also, it increases students' efficiency. They prepare themselves before they actually get to the classroom. So they are very, very efficient. There's no time wasting in the classroom because they know what they are supposed to be asking their teachers. Another thing that flipped classroom helps students to do is to be able to collaborate better and be able to do a lot of interactive learning activities. It also increases individualized learning skills because students do a lot of the activities themselves. It helps them to be able to learn individually by themselves. It also helps to encourage problem solving skills in students. So how is flipped classroom related to distance education? Now, as I explained earlier, in flipped classroom, there is some component of the learning that takes place outside the classroom. And distance education is usually also outside of the classroom, because students are actually separated from the teacher, and therefore they are related in a way that all these category of students interact with some form of materials outside of their classroom. They use computers, they use flash drive, they use electricity, they use the internet, they search for information online. When we come to how they are different, the core of distance education is the separation of the learner from the teacher. However, in flipped classroom, even though some form of learning activities occur outside of the classroom, the learner actually comes back to the classroom to be able to interact with other peers and the teacher. And therefore, there is no separation of learner from the instructor in flipped classroom. They actually come together and solve problems together and help the learner learn better. And so this is how I believe flipped classroom is different and similar to distance education. I hope you've been able to learn something from this literature review. This is my reference.